Sheila Birling is a ray of hope in the otherwise pretty terrible cast of characters that make up an Inspector Calls. She is the most receptive to Inspector Goole's message and appears to really take responsibility for her actions. But the irony is that she is the one character who doesn't have the power to change anything. Let's take a look at why that is. In 1912, when this play was set, women did not have any power on their own. They started out under the control of their parents, and then later on their husbands. With no right to vote and no possibility of achieving any real success in a career, their best shot at influence and power was to marry well. And the only way to marry well in most cases was to be born into some kind of wealth or social status, due to the class system that also existed at that time. These factors heavily influence the way that Sheila is introduced in the play, as a pretty girl in her early 20s, very pleased with life and rather excited. This is because she is on the verge of securing probably the best match she could possibly get as a middle-class woman, a rich and titled businessman named Gerald Croft, who is her social superior and a business rival of her father. Because of their connection in business, Sheila and Gerald's engagement is a dream come true for Arthur Birling, who can use his daughter's marriage to further his own social and financial goals. Their whole relationship is set up to be transactional from the start, with Mr. Birling toasting to Crofts and Birlings working together for lower costs and higher prices. Sheila herself views their relationship in materialistic terms, waiting until she gets her diamond ring to say, "Now I really feel engaged." This highlights her shallowness and superficiality, which was typical of the privileged youth of that time, who were completely unaware of the struggles of the working class and content to live in ignorant bliss. Because she is so sheltered and privileged, she comes across as very immature for her age, calling Mrs. Birling "mummy," and wanting to get her father's approval by securing her marriage with Gerald. She bows to their authority as her parents, which makes sense since they are in control of her life. However, she is not as naive and flighty as she pretends to be, which she shows when she questions Gerald about his absence during the summer, in a half-serious, half-playful way. Underneath her jokey, carefree exterior, she knows that something else is going on, and this gives us a glimpse of the Sheila who comes out later, who is the most switched on out of everyone. The arrival of Inspector Goole marks the beginning of this transformation, as unlike the other characters, she is immediately affected by the news of Eva Smith's death, exclaiming, "Oh, how horrible!" This might be because her and Eva share some similarities. Both are described as pretty girls in their 20s. Although Sheila has no concept of the struggles Eva has had to endure, her age and gender allows her to relate to her in some way and feel sympathy for her, particularly because of the contrast between their situations. Sheila is full of excitement because she is about to start a new life as a married woman, while Eva's future was so bleak that she ended hers. Because of her empathy for Eva, she is immediately far more receptive to the inspector's message, and takes his side pretty much from the start over her parents, which is a surprise considering her previous childlike behavior. She directly calls out her father for his treatment of his employees, saying, "These girls aren't cheap labor, they're people." Even when it comes to her turn in the hot seat, she willingly reveals her part in Eva's demise, admitting that she had her fired from her job at a clothes store because she looked better in a dress than Sheila did. This kind of petty act was done out of jealousy, and highlights Sheila's immaturity as she acted out in a furious temper without thinking about the consequences for Eva. She even says that, "If she'd been some miserable plain little creature, I don't suppose I'd have done it. But she was very pretty, and looked as if she could take care of herself." Sheila assumed that, like her, looks alone will pave her way through life, but this isn't the case because of one big factor: their class difference. Sheila's good looks and social status means that she is able to secure her place in life through marriage to wealthy upper-class men, whereas Eva's beauty is just a disadvantage to her as a poor working-class woman. Because people rarely married outside of their social class, she will be used and abused by men like Gerald Croft and Eric Birling, and then discarded once they tire of her. This realization only further cements Sheila's determination to take responsibility for her actions and side with Inspector Goole's message of social responsibility. She openly admits, "It was my own fault," which directly contrasts how defensive her parents are about their actions. Despite her previous lack of awareness of the struggles of the working class, Sheila quickly switches on after her grilling from the inspector, and even helps him to interrogate some of the other characters, notably Gerald, as she instantly picks up on his affair with Daisy and asks him almost as many questions as the inspector. She understands that there is a chain of events that led to Eva's death, and that they are all culpable for what happened and need to take responsibility. Although the rest of her family are very loath to take any blame for their actions, Sheila early on tries to help them to grasp the message of social responsibility that they all need to learn, saying to her mother in Act 2, "You mustn't try to build up a kind of wall between us and that girl. If you do, the inspector will just break it down." She seems to transfer her deference for her parents to the inspector and realizes that his authority and knowledge are unquestionable. This sets her up to become the inspector's proxy when he leaves, meaning that she acts as his mouthpiece when he is no longer around. And it is only when the Birlings and Gerald are left to their own devices that Sheila's transformation really becomes clear. The rest of the characters, apart from Eric, are very quick to jump on Gerald's conspiracy theory that the inspector is not really an inspector, and that Eva and Daisy are not the same people. This is the easy way out, to just sweep everything under the rug and pretend nothing happened because there is no one to hold them accountable. But Sheila is determined not to let that happen and to get them to hold on to the lessons they have learned that night. In Act 3, she consistently calls out her parents for wanting to revert back to the way things were, saying, "You're just beginning to pretend again. Everything we said had happened really had happened. If it didn't end tragically, then that's lucky for us, but it might have done." This shows her commitment to change and social responsibility is real, but as I mentioned earlier, it almost doesn't matter, because Sheila has no power in this society. This is obvious by the way she is continually treated by her parents and by Gerald, who dismiss her as a hysterical, silly young girl, even though she is the only one who is speaking sense. So why does Priestley write Sheila as the character who really understands the lesson? Well, at the time this play was written, at the very end of World War II, women were at last able to vote, thanks to decades of struggle from the suffragettes. And during the war, women began to have more power in the country. Since all the men were off fighting, someone had to take charge of the industries to keep things running back home. Women were working, voting, and making a difference in society, a power shift that would disrupt the historically patriarchal society forever. So Priestley is thinking about his audience, who would be full of young women with a new sense of ownership over their lives that shared the inspector and Sheila's views. He is speaking to them through her character, who understands what needs to change, but is completely powerless to do anything about it. Priestley is saying that if women want to see long-lasting change, they need to fight for it, and use the power they have earned to avoid the mistakes that have been made in the past by patriarchal societies. This idea is highlighted in possibly the most important moment for Sheila at the very end of the play, when Gerald tries to give her back the engagement ring that she took off when she found out about the affair with Daisy. With a sickening amount of confidence, Gerald says, "Everything's all right now, Sheila. What about this ring?" Nothing has changed. Gerald still cheated on her by his own admission, but has the nerve to expect that she will be grateful to take him back because he remains the best option that she has for marriage. And although we would expect the new and improved Sheila to throw it back in his face, she surprisingly answers, "No, not yet. It's too soon. I must think." This is not really a no, and implies that she actually will take him back after he does a little more groveling. So is Sheila too falling back into her old habits and giving in to the pressure from her parents and Gerald to forget everything she has learned? That would explain why the call comes straight after, because none of them have truly changed. Or has she learned her lesson, but realized that she has no power to change anything or get anyone to take her seriously? Maybe she's accepted that the only way for her to get away from her parents is to marry someone with more wealth and status, giving her more influence in society. Someone like Gerald. Even though he has cheated on her and clearly doesn't respect her, we have to remember that most marriages back then weren't for love anyway, and were more about securing your social status. So perhaps this really is the best option for her in a lose-lose situation. What do you think? Has Sheila really changed at the end, or will she too go back to her old ways? Let me know your opinions in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for follow-up analysis videos soon to come. See you next time!